the Voice of Retail podcast. My name is Michael LeBlanc, and I am your host. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. On this episode, I welcome back to the podcast Scott Arsenault, CEO at Rens Pets. We catch up on this fast-moving pet retailer and how Scott and the team are bringing their philosophy of your pet's best life into more Canadian communities every day. Scott talks about what makes Rens different in a crowded category, their elements of sustainable competitive advantage, key trends in the category for the future, and the importance of team members, leadership lessons learned over his long tenure at Rens Pets, this 40-year award-winning overnight success, now with 50 stores plus and growing. Scott, welcome back to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing?
Fantastic, and always great to talk to an advocate like yourself, Michael.
Well, thank you, sir. My doggo Ziggy continues to enjoy products from Rens, and he's healthy and happy, and just a pile of fun and a pile of energy. Now, you've been on the podcast before, as I mentioned, but it's been a while. I was checking the date. I mean, it was early, even pre-pandemic, so it's long overdue time to catch up. A lot has happened in your business life. So let's start at the beginning. For those who maybe missed the first episode or know a little bit about you but want to know more, who are you? What's your background? And what do you do for a living?
So I've had 3 coffees today. Be forewarned, you get me going, Michael, and I love talking about Rens Pets. That's been pretty exciting, but I'm in my 12th year, if you can believe it here. I know you live in Oakville. We've been around 48 years. That was our first location in the city, and we're soon to open up a second store in Oakville. And before I get to that, I'll just go back in time. 3 stores. Ren was around. He's still around. He's going to help us do our ribbon cutting. He's a patriarch. He's moved out of the business, but we still, have that foundational entrepreneurship that he started over 48 years ago with his wife, Sharon. His son, Colin, took over. Worked for Colin from 3 to 10 stores. We were sold to private equity, around 36 stores. And here today, we're going to be at 50 stores, 7 stores by the end of the year with our new family, the Legault family out of Quebec. So it's been a lot of rapid expansion. But people say every overnight success takes about 40 years. And that's true for Rens because in the last 8 years, we've really seen some changes in growth.
Yeah, you've really nailed it in terms of accelerating the business, and congratulations on finding the right partners. Never easy. Now, about you, did you always wanted to be in retail? Sometimes it's described as the accidental career. How did you find your way into Rens? And talk a little bit about that. You
know what? I had my own marketing company. I have a teaching degree, and I was around in the Ray days, and there was no jobs, and I just went into kind of the business world and navigated my way through and got into marketing, and that's how I found Rens. I helped them open store number 3 and market it, and Colin, who was Ren's son at the time, said, I like building, and I'd love to have somebody in operations. So I literally sat in the same office that I'm sitting in for 6 months. I listened to every word that he had been in the business since he was 16 years old, and he had grown it dramatically and built a distribution center in Guelph and had a passion for real estate and the pet industry as well, and was really a leader. And he just said, I want to kind of grow the business from a real estate perspective and footprint. I'd love you to do the sales and operation. And that's where I started, graduated to president, and here I am CEO now.
Let's talk about Rens Pets. So you've talked about already the number of stores you've got, but tell if somebody maybe doesn't have a pet, maybe they're not so familiar with your organization's scope, scale, what makes you different and remarkable as a retailer in a pretty crowded category.
For sure. So Rens Pets is here for your pet's best life. And that's the guiding principle, the North Star for us is, every day that anybody that works in this company can ask themselves, is this for somebody's pet's best life? And it could be somebody that's in shipping or logistics if the product doesn't get there. And what we really feel is important for, your pet's best life is your diet. And as you know, I know you feed a premium food, you feed a great food, and you're a great pet parent, and you know how important that is as any family member. We're all looking at our caloric intake and what makes up. So for pets, it's super important. And that's where the fun all begins. We can sell the treats and toys, and we are a category killer in that, but we want to make sure that we have the diet, and we're uber focused on dog and cat. So that's really kind of where it kind of resonates for us is we've decided to, kind of draw that line in the sand, dog and cat. We want to make sure that we have premium diets, affordably priced, so that the pet can have their best life. And when you look at our stores, they're anywhere from 7 to 10,000 square feet. So we're a mid-sized retailer, but when you put us in the scope of some of the other bigger boxes and we just focusing on dog and cat, we're actually a much bigger in the category. And then when you put the assortment we have premium, you see how we're a leader in kind of that area.
Now, we'll get to all these awards that you're winning, but let's talk about e-commerce, because you're no slacker, to say the least, in e-commerce. Talk about the evolution of that element of your business.
Yeah, that started back in store number 1, back in Oakville on Trafalgar. It was born out of the idea for a mail order business, primarily for professionals and groomer business. So that's where the need started. We had built a new store right beside our old store, and there's people that are still with us 25 years later that picked the first orders for e-commerce almost 20 years ago. So we've long been shipping across Canada and doing this. I've been here for a couple platform evolutions and seeing, the evolution of getting pet food online and trying to navigate heavy weights and big products to consumers that are so important. Fast forward to just this year, we won the Omni-Channel Retailer of the Year in North America for the pet industry, which is, as you say, a pretty crowded space. Some big giants there that have thousands of stores within North America, and for the number one publication to recognize Rens. And why they did that was because we were unique. We were a category leader in many areas, but one of the areas was frozen food. And we saw that raw was really emerging as a category. And as we were shipping food and diet, we're like, people need to understand how they can get this to their homes. So we were ordering by 2, shipping same day. We were in that space doing really well, but we're like, how can we get frozen there? So we implemented DoorDash so that people could get their food, if it was a raw or frozen diet, for their pet same day. And combining all of that energy as an omni-channel retailer, we were given that designation of Omni-Channel Retailer of the Year for Pet for North America.
No, congratulations. It's a huge achievement for you and the team. Crowded space, lots of competition, lots of people doing great stuff. One thing I wanted to touch on, and you kind of alluded to it, but just for the listeners, is that you don't offer in the store grooming and other services, because you kind of made that line, I think, very early on, that one of your clients will be the professional groomers, and you didn't want to compete with them. Is that still the case? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, you know what? You got a great memory. I've always said we don't compete with our partners. So, we don't groom in our stores. We don't train. We don't breed or sell. And we've been an advocate in communities or partnering with people like grooming. So we have the largest assortment of grooming products for professionals in Canada. So that's one example where you can shop where the pros shop. We got all the good clippers, blades, shears, shampoos, high-end stuff. Yeah. And we saw that as a partner. And these are the people that are sending their customers to us. So, we decided not to do any of those. And it's similar with some of the trainers. And, obviously we don't sell pets in our stores, but the trainers, the high-end trainers, they send their pets to us because we're not competing with them. And, and it's really been a winning strategy across the board for us as we grow our stores out.
Yeah, I thought it's a sustainable success factor for you guys. I've always thought of it that way. Like, I thought, such an original idea. There must be temptations always in every strategic meeting. We'll get to this later, should we get into, but I think you're pretty clear-minded about it. So let's talk about trends in the pet business. I mean, your sector had a really good run, so to speak, with the pandemic puppy years. There's some built-in volume annuity, so to speak, from that growth in pets, dogs and cats. But beyond that, what are the key trends that you're keeping an eye on to understand the future of the business between 5 and 7 years out?
Yeah, it's been a great business year over year. And we were a leader in the 4th category, kind of freeze-dried and frozen, which is the fastest growing category for us. And we've talked about this in the past. We had a lot of, freezers in our stores, and they were just the double door ones, but it didn't give a lot of overstock space. And Rens always had a lot of product in their stores, busy stores. You could stack out dry kibble food, but you can't stack out frozen or kind of that category of food. Yeah. So we invested in walk-in freezers early. We tested it at 5 doors. Our stores now all have at least 16 doors. Some have 20. Going back, since we invested in the 16th store to 57, we've had walk-in freezers, and now we've gone back and retrofitted almost 100% of all of Rens has a walk-in freezer, barring a couple locations. And that category is still a category that seems to be one that's the fastest growing and emerging. And it's complex because it takes CapEx, it takes investment, freezers,
Cold chain, you got a cold chain, right? I mean,
the
electricity goes out, you got to watch for that kind of stuff, right?
Sure. We we've gotten into some tornadoes or some hurricanes in the east and some different power outages last year. For sure, we learned all about generators and second source electricity. But that's one. The other two that I really think is important now, and I'm seeing it emerge, and it's been emerging for a while, but it was last year I saw it at our Super Zoo in Vegas, where sourcing and ethically sourced and Pet Sustainability Coalition, they've been talking about it for 5 years, and sometimes you got to get this out, but that's really resonating. You're seeing more tetracycling, package recycling, leading companies like Open Farm, they know where every ingredient and every source is coming from, so they can traceability. These are things that really resonate with the consumer, on top of Canadian products and the fact that we're Canadian owned. So I would say those, always our brands are doing a great job making sure we're on trend and what's happening within the kibble and the foods and toys and the treats. But from a real standpoint, I'd say that fourth category is growing. Ethically sourced sustainability is really emerging. Canadian sourced, and the fact that we're Canadian owned seems to still resonate high.
It's a super interesting point. On one of my other podcasts, I had the opportunity to chat with Vince Breton from Du Breton Pork, it's what we use exclusively in our house and what I cook with on my YouTube show, because I just feel for the animals. I want them to, as the farmers would say, have a great life and one bad day. And that same thinking starts to extend to what you're feeding your, as you say, they're your other family members, right? So, not ignoring, where that product comes from either. I think for a full understanding, it's a great point. I was in the U.S. Last week, a week and a half ago, and one of your category counterparts was talking about insurance and getting into insurances. Is that of any interest to you, or does that kind of fit in the professional area and it's just a different line of business? Do you think there's any opportunity in that?
Yeah, we've thought about that one. Nobody likes to talk insurance, right? So we never wanted to be the bad news story and make sure even tarnish our brand. But there's definitely secondary sources of income. But having that uber focus on who we are, you really shed that stuff quickly. We've thought of things, and I talk on that comment, but vending machines and en routes, right, in Canada and stuff like that. And would we do that?
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, but and people are there with their pets, and could we do it? And we could do a lot of things, right? So those things pop up, and then we just say, it kind of. I always go back to that good to great. Are we passionate about it? Can we be the best at it, and can it make money? Yeah. And so I don't think we'd be passionate about it. I don't think we could be the best at it. And I'm sure we probably could make money. But at this point, some of those secondary services I feel would be outside of our lane.
Well, let's talk about your growth. You're talking about opening a bunch of stores this year. You're clearly expanding into the Maritimes, and you've got the resources of the Legault Group behind you now. How do you translate that into sustainable market share growth? It's one thing to open a bunch of stores, but it's another thing to get market share growth out of that. You get some, store over store growth, but to sustain it, how do you think about that?
We have a recipe. I'll tell you about the recipe. Yeah, so it's 5 provinces. I had to write them down. I was like, okay, Ontario, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. But we're adding Newfoundland this month, and we're adding PEI this summer, which is a hometown favorite for me. Both my parents are from there. We're going to have a big ribbon cutting there in the summer. So that'll be fantastic. Maybe have some deep sea fishing while we're out there. But we're 5 provinces, 57 stores, and we haven't closed a store, and they've all been profitable. And so I think that's unique to be able to say that as a retailer. Our footprints are big, and definitely expansion has been rapid. But the secret sauce has been, I was heavily involved in this in the early days, and then we had a 30, 60, 90-day approach. What should we be doing at 90 days and 60 days and 30? And it was from a marketing and gaining customer acquisition. It was pretty rudimentary. I would sit with my VP of retail, and at the time we say, who's contacting the local humane society, and who's contacting the licensing programs, and who's reaching out to the groomers, and who's calling the mayor for ribbon cutting and all that stuff. So we've since really kind of professionalized that or grown up, and we've taken those same core elements about how we open in a market. But what we want when we go into market is 2,000 Rens customers before we open. And we've been able to deliver on that because we understand the trajectory that puts us on. And we do that through ground. We get out in the ground and we go door to door and we see our partners, whether it's breeders, groomers, rescues. And we also see other local businesses around our market. So we have somebody feet in the streets type of thing, and marketing our brand. We shower it digitally. and we're acquiring customers digitally for when we open. So there's a lot of pent up demand before we get into a market, when we want to make sure we're connecting with the humane societies, the licensing programs, and anybody
trainers,
local there
whoever,
that would
right?
help us.
Yeah.
So somebody's assigned to do that. Somebody's assigned to make sure we have a digital footprint, our marketing footprint, and then we have our grand opening and our 30 days after that we track going forward. And we actually look at signups and rewards and customer acquisition by day, average sales and opportunity conversion and all these things that are really unique. And so there's a lot of data baked into it, but a lot of common sense as well.
Yeah, it's a pretty rigorous approach for sure. And it strikes me that it ladders back to one element or pillar of your core strategy, right? You've got probably an installed base of professionals who are buying from the catalog over decades of their grooming tools. So right away, you've got an installed base in places that you've never physically been. It's a really neat strategy. Let's talk about the people working in those stores. So right now, it's probably one of the most important issues for retailers coast to coast is finding and keeping the right people. So what's working for you? What's the secret sauce opening all those stores and finding the right people?
Yeah, so every company has some rocks or some epics that they're working on. We just reviewed ours that we have a monthly review on stuff. Is it still current? Is it, and people's number one and first, and then obviously break out what you're doing towards it. But I said to my leadership team, and I have to remind them that they're a team, that the team that reports to me, you're my team, because a lot of times they got to make sure that, and I'm like, when I do their review, I say, do you belong? Do you have meaning? Do you have purpose? And I ask these questions and pause and wait. Do you feel validated and like you have a future? And they can tick the box, I think, on all of those because they feel like they're here for their pet's best life. They like working here. They belong. They got purpose. Like we're growing, do I give them enough recognition and feedback that we're winning awards externally, internally, and do they have a future? So they can tick the box. And I said, you need to take that to your team and your team needs to take it to their team. And if people have that, they're validated, the purpose, validation, and future. And so that's one kind of baseline where you start. And I think those are 5 core things that people really want to know. We've all been in jobs where there's no future. Nobody validates us. It's not purposeful. We don't believe in the core values of the company or the products. And then what comes out of that is listening to our teams. And, a lot of people say they do this, but we have a weekly huddle and everybody's on that. And that started at head office with 3 stores and every manager and every associate. I used to do all the hiring, but we've evolved that. It's done digitally now, but the store manager's still on there. We still have that feedback. And one of the things that came out of that last year, I think we started this over 12 months ago. We started something called the turnover troop. And I just got to let that kind of marinate there because what we did with the turnover troop is we took a cut from everywhere in the company, whether it was home office, receivers, warehouse, distribution, drivers, retail, associates, part-time. And we gathered about 12 people, made sure we had an assortment from every kind of different genre in the company. And we asked them, to tell us. And I thought for sure more wages, more benefits was going to come out of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like we started to ask why people stay as opposed to why people leave, So what came out of that was they didn't bang their fist first about wages. Obviously, they want to be competitive and they want to grow and that. But a lot of things were communication. One thing from a retailer you're going to have is our home office team. They're on email. They're on these town halls. But the people that are facing the customer weren't hearing enough from head office. And we felt like we were really communicating well, any pitfalls, any breaks in the road type of thing or anything that was coming up. But what was happening was it wasn't getting right down to that part-timer that was talking to you and your partner, your wife on the weekend about your dog's food. And that was critical. So there was a misstep there. And what came out of there was, hey, how about a digital town hall that we can watch at work, less than 15 minutes and give us an update. Tell us about the leaders. Tell us who you are. So we implemented that. More rewards. What came out for them? A lot of people didn't know about our employee feeding, the discounting they got, the benefits they got. We literally just had to sometimes spell it out and say, what can we do that's more, get our vendors and partners. But a lot of it was communication. They didn't know they got these deals and different things. So, and then finally they said, we want to have a say. So we launched our first engagement survey, and I'm happy to say that completed. Our goal was to have 60% people reply in the company, over 700 people. And I think we ended up over 65%. So we just completed that, and we committed to, within 4 weeks, dissecting that information and getting back to them with 1 to 3 points that we were going to work on based on what they said. So I think, it's a tough market, whether it's home office or it's at retail. But a lot of that just starts from making sure they have belonging and purpose, listening, and then acting on it.
Last couple of questions for you. Talk about the your lessons that you've had. I mean, you've been with the firm for a while, but a lot has happened, between COVID, acquisition twice, I guess, rapid store growth, supply chain challenges. What leadership lessons have you known? I think you're articulating some of them already, the benefits of broad and deep communication, but anything else you've taken away from it that you would say, these are lessons I've learned that I'd want to share?
Can I give you 3? And I'll do it in a shorter version. Yeah. So for sure, first one, keep a growth mindset, because leadership is learned. It's not innate. I know you unequivocally could say that as well. I can't believe what I didn't know and what I've learned in the last 5 years. And I see people that are well ahead of my career early on because they're having the coaching that I should have had early on. So keep reading, keep learning. If this was a video in that growth mindset, I came into my office this morning. I had Radical Candor on my desk. Somebody put it back on with all my sticky notes. I have the multiplier effect, and I also have the psychological safety that I gave to all my leadership team and talked about that. So keep learning and every time really intrigued. So that's one. Yeah. People first decisions. That sounds easier. We have our HR team remind us they're not the police. They're a vehicle to help us. And we have to if we're making people first decisions, it gets really easy, but you can have blind spots there for sure. So check yourself if you're making people first decisions. And then the third one, so critical for leaders, and they don't do enough of it, is sleep. Yeah. You cannot be an emotional, intelligent leader without getting 7 hours of sleep consistently. You will not feel good. You'll not be a good partner, husband, wife, friend. You definitely won't be great at work. Challenge yourself to get good sleep. You let your brain refresh so that you can show up the best.
I used to manage, for 10 years, I managed my daughter's elite soccer team, and I used to tell them all sleep is the superpower. Like, for anyone, it is the most underrated. Now, I feel bad about sending you the questions at 3:30 in the morning, but that's a whole other discussion. That's a whole other thing. Listen, last question for you. Advice to your fellow retailers. 2 starts, 1 stop kind of framing. Things they should start doing if they're not, and one thing that maybe they should stop. It's just not working anymore. But what, if you had a group of folks who do what you do for a living, what are the kind of key things you'd say? You got to start doing this, and you know what? Maybe this doesn't work anymore for me, and maybe it won't work for you anymore.
Really read, that is amazing. Every time I really got to, I'd say get to sleep, that's really, really important. I'd stop short-term reactions and you'll see that right now, in the market and headwinds and stuff like that. Days don't make weeks and weeks don't make months, or they do actually. But my point on that is, you can't have this short-term vision. You've got to be nimble and agile and look at the business. But I have a saying of 911. So you can't be sky is falling. You can't be 911. And, so I think right now it's going to be important for leaders to check what their core values are, what they said their strategy was, adjust if they need to, but you don't try and turn the ship around overnight, and it never adds value, even though sometimes as a leader you can be nervous or scared. I said this morning, was I grumpy or was I, that type of thing. But then I said, I'm not sure, agitated. But yeah, as leaders, you got to check that for sure, especially in any tough environment.
Yeah, that last point's really interesting because it's this not a dichotomy necessarily, but between having a sense of urgency and momentum versus freaking people out too much. Basically, like you've triangulated 3 points. 1 is a lot of communication. 2 is that sense of urgency and momentum, and 3 just not being so urgent and so much momentum that it freaks people out and they kind of start to get worried about that. Is that am I getting that right?
Yeah, because sometimes you're shooting for the stars and falling in the clouds, and the messaging that you can be bringing can be taken so different. And, I had one message this year where I said it in a huddle, and there's about 100 people that are on our, teams huddles across Canada now in 5 provinces. And I had my team give me feedback. We were adding a bunch of people, but I said maybe we weren't adding as much. It was taken as we weren't adding at all. And it was like, no, we're adding it. We're just maybe not adding as much as originally planned. So, you know, and you have to be really careful because that can send people, all the messaging on that can be very different to a lot of different people. And you got to make sure, you know, who you're talking to. And you
unintended
also,
consequences, right? The unintended consequences of things, little things like that.
You want to make sure that you're being honest with your teams too, right? So it's like, you can't be like, hey, everything's great or everything's bad, and it's not. So somebody might, their leadership style might be like, oh, let's keep them always aggressive and let them know, right? You know, on the edge. And that's not fair when you're doing really good. And the other thing is, you know, hey, saying everything's really good, maybe in even a relationship. I find so much of this personal and professional overlaps, and then you just hit somebody over the head and say, wow, you know, I'm not happy. Or business isn't doing good. And they're like, this is the first time hearing of it, right? So,
where'd that come from? Yeah.
So
interesting. Well, you've got a broad set of stakeholders. You're doing a fantastic job, and it's a real treat to catch up. What's next for you guys? I guess it's a funny question for you because there's a lot next. You're opening stores, you're killing categories, you're winning awards. Anything you want to add?
We got a big award coming up, and I'll give you a little teaser on that. Can't say anything today, but there's the team's done a lot of work on some of that stuff. But I think we're going to we opened a new distribution center, and the reason we did that is we wanted to create 25,000 square feet of just e-com. So we're calling it an e-com store. It was traditionally our distribution center for our retail. So we're going to double, if not triple, our e-commerce footprint in terms of SKUs and size that we can handle. And so while I think it's not new to a lot of people, it'll be new to Rens that we're going to freshen up and really expand our, you know, offering to pet parents across Canada. And that's kind of exciting. You're going to see us continue to open the stores as we do and open new provinces. I don't think that's going to change. But I think the one big thing is our digital focus this year. We've just finished what we called open heart surgery. We took our warehouse and moved it, and we approached it over 8 weeks like that. I think it was a good analogy because and we had our last meeting on Friday. We have stitched up and completed that exercise. So we're moving forward now with expanding our e-commerce footprint and SKUs.
Well, congratulations on that alone, because that can be a heart-stopping moment, or several heart-stopping moments with those big systems. Well, listen, Scott, always a treat to talk to you, and thanks again so much for joining me on the Voice of Retail podcast. I wish you much continued success and look forward to catching up in person real soon.
Yeah, I think we'll see each other over the next few months. And again, love listening to everything you're doing. Keep going, barbecue stuff or just retail in general. You're a fun person to listen to and learn from.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, be sure and follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure to check out my other retail industry media properties, Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis, and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. Last but not least, if you're into barbecue, check out my YouTube barbecue show, Last Request Barbecue, with new episodes each and every week. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, Consumer Growth Consultant, President of M.E. LeBlanc Company Inc., Maven Media, and keynote speaker. If you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at meleblanc.co. Safe travels, everyone.